When I drew nigh the nameless city, I knew it was accursed. I was travelling in a parched and terrible valley under the moon, and afar I saw it protruding uncannily above the sands, as parts of a corpse may protrude from an ill-made grave. Fear spoke from the age-worn stones of this hoary survivor of the deluge, this great-grandmother of the eldest pyramid, and a viewless aura repelled me, and bade me retreat from antique and sinister secrets that no man should see, and no man else had ever dared to see. Remote in the desert of Arabia lies the nameless city, crumbling and inarticulate, its low walls nearly hidden by the sands of uncounted ages. It must have been thus before the first stones of Memphis were laid, and while the bricks of Babylon were yet unbaked. There is no legend so old as to give it a name, or to recall that it was ever alive, but it is told of in whispers around campfires, and muttered about by grandams in the tents of sheikhs, so that all the tribes shun it, without wholly knowing why. It was of this place that Abdul al-Hazred, the mad poet, dreamed, on the night before he sang his unexplainable couplet. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. I should have known that the Arabs had good reason for shunning the nameless city, the city told of in strange tales, but seen by no living man. Yet I defied them, and went into the untrodden waste with my camel. I alone have seen it, and that is why no other face bears such hideous lines of fear as mine.
Sure. He says, well, you take them then. So I did.
Does these plates that you have, do they have the, drawing that he drew and it has like the alligator or snake head or something like that? Does any of your plates have that on it?
No. No, just the drawing that he made of the mummies has it on.
Right.
It's not on any of the plates. If you ever come down here, I'll show you pictures of all these things.
Yeah, I'd like to see pictures of those plates you have, because the plate, one of the plates that was on in the other box does have one of them dragon heads or alligator or snake, whatever it is, and it has the exact markings on it that he's drawn on the male mummy.
Oh, yeah.
So
one of my plates has a scorpion on it, but that's as closest.
Okay.
I ain't even seen David Blaine or no one like that do. See nothing like that. And I goes to bed one night, and I wake up paralysed, can't move. There's white lights everywhere, bright lights everywhere. My body lifts up. Just before I hit the ceiling, everything goes black. Next thing I can remember, falling back into my bed on top of the covers, and there's something moving about in my back. I can still feel it now sometimes.
It's still there?
Yeah. Feels all hot round here as well.
You mentioned on the phone some kind of life form, like a symbiont out of the TV series Stargate.
Yeah, but bigger. And yeah, probably more than one entity.
Filming? Right, what we're doing in the room at the moment is checking for background RF radiation from Wi-Fi, what have you. We're on sensitivity 6. We're using a Allen broadband zap checker from the States, which we use to basically try and find if we have implants in the body which transmit signals. And that is off the scale. The machine is vibrating. Can you feel that, Dave? Yeah, okay, we'll pull away. We're back down to 20 again. Back up to the spine. Way up to 100. Let's drop it down to sensitivity 6.
We go up and then down the body?
Up. You want to go down the body. That's on sensitivity 8.
Yeah, all very sinister. But this thing that went into me was like a sort of, a bit like on Stargate, like a sort of dandelion shaped sort of the head and the bottom, some kind of weird creature, and another thing went down my nose again with the dark energy. So it could enter like
describe those things?
Centipede, reptilian kind of sort of snake-like.
Snake-like.
I don't want to come into the cliches.
Okay.
But this was like very similar to like a dandelion looking thing, and the other thing like a sort of dinosaur head, but like sort of centipede with lots of legs, and very nasty creature. Yeah, crazy, not very nice, no. Kind of went down on me after, yeah.
Years ago, many years ago, in fact, 1972, I was sitting at my desk at about 4:30 in the morning at the headquarters of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, arranging the information that had come in over the last 24 hours into a logical order so that we could prepare a briefing for the Admiral and his staff, which would take place later that morning. Among the papers I found on my desk was a document entitled Operation Majority, and it was not the entire paperwork involving this operation, but was merely a synopsis of the operation and projects contained under it. One of these projects was called Project Red Light. The purpose, according to this document, was to back-engineer captured extraterrestrial technology for adaptation into the United States space program. Now, I have since come to believe that the extraterrestrial portion of all of this is nonsense, but that the technology is real. I believe that many of us were shown these documents over the years so that later we would talk about it. I mean, how can you keep the existence of extraterrestrials, if they were real, a secret? And how could anyone keep quiet knowing that they had seen documentation, official government documents labeled top secret, that expressed that these extraterrestrials were real and had visited this Earth? I wanted to know just how true all of this was, and I began a program of research to find out if extraterrestrials were real. The first thing I did was collect every bit of documentation that I could find, both from the Freedom of Information Act, from the research of others, from books that had been printed on the subject of UFOs, and of course through my network of friends in the intelligence community. What I discovered was amazing. What I discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that there has been a plan in existence since about 1917, and probably before that, to create an artificial extraterrestrial threat to this Earth in order to create a one-world totalitarian socialist government. One of the first documents that I found in my search was this one, the Imperial Japanese Mission 1917, a record of the reception throughout the United States of the special mission headed by Viscount Ishii. And when the Imperial Japanese Mission was in New York City, they had a dinner, and some pretty famous people spoke at this dinner. One of them was John Dewey. John Dewey is the father of our failing, disastrous public education system. Here's what he said. Listen very carefully. John Dewey, professor of philosophy in Columbia University, who was the next speaker, was listened to with great intentness. He said, quote, Someone remarked that the best way to unite all the nations on this globe would be an attack from some other planet. In the face of such an alien enemy, people would respond with a sense of their unity of interest and purpose." Unquote. Now, bear in mind, folks, that's 1917. One of the next documents that I found, and I found quite a few, but one that's pretty important, is called the Report from Iron Mountain, The Probability and Desirability of Permanent Peace. Now, I encourage you to find this book, wherever you can find it. I don't know where you can get it, but find it. Page 66. Credibility, in fact, lies at the heart of the problem of developing a political substitute for war. This is where the space race proposals, in many ways so well suited as economic substitutes for war, fall short. The most ambitious and unrealistic space project cannot of itself generate a believable external menace. It has been hotly argued that such a menace would offer the last best hope of peace, etc., by uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets or from outer space. Experiments have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat. And it continues on another page. Nevertheless, an effective political substitute for war would require alternate enemies, some of which might seem equally far-fetched in the context of the current war system. It may be, for instance, that gross pollution of the environment can eventually replace the possibility of mass destruction by nuclear weapons as the principal substitute for war. Are you beginning to get the message, folks? Poisoning of the air and of the principal sources of food and water supply is already well advanced, and at first glance would seem promising in this respect. It constitutes a threat that can be dealt with only through social organization and political power. But from present indications, it will be a generation to a generation and a half before environmental pollution, however severe, will be sufficiently menacing on a global scale to offer a possible basis for a solution. However unlikely some of the possible alternate enemies we have mentioned may seem, we must emphasize that one must be found of credible quality and magnitude if a transition to peace is ever to come about without social disintegration. It is more probable, in our judgment, that such a threat will have to be invented rather than developed from unknown conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, they have created so many alternate enemies in order to bring about their one-world totalitarian socialist state that we don't know which enemy to believe is real or is false, or whether to just toss them all out on their ears. And I think that that is probably going to be the best solution. Disarmament is no accident. All of these bills in Congress to take away our weapons is no accident. The intentional environmental pollution of our lakes, rivers, streams, oceans, forests, everything is no accident, as you just heard. These things were planned many, many years ago.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting, and I want to share this with everybody. For those who really don't understand the history, it's hard to really get your arms around this stuff, and so I would just want to paint a current picture of the history for you. If you go to YouTube right now, guys, there's a YouTube channel called Balfour 100, and right there right now you'll find, under the title Balfour 100, you'll find an exclusive interview with Lord Rothschild on his family's involvement in the 1917 Balfour Declaration, the 67 words which led to the creation of the State of Israel. And I'm going to play some of that for you right now, because you're going to hear in Lord Rothschild's own words just how very proud they are of these facts of which we've been speaking.
November the 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
So it's possibly the most famous letter in modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words: Dear Lord Rothschild. Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question, because he was really interested in ornithology, although he became interested in Zionism. I think the reason was this, that it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
All right, I'll pause it there. You know, I watched this in its entirety just probably a week ago now, and it's really fascinating because it's just gushing. It's just this conversation between these two, and Rothschild is very proud of the history. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Do you want to hear any more from this, or do you just want to discuss the importance of the Balfour Declaration? Because it really is the document that propelled us into a world war.
Sure, and by the way, that letter, I have that in chapter 10 of the book. The rest of the letter goes, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status shown and enjoyed by Jews in any other country.
Well, they forgot about that part now, haven't they?
Yes, they did.
The media has misled the public into believing that Queen Elizabeth II is a symbolic ceremonial figurehead with little or no real power, that she is a cold but harmless old relic who passes her time sipping tea at the palace. Nothing could be further from the truth. As British monarch, Queen Elizabeth II is the wealthiest, most powerful person on earth. She embodies the crown and supreme world power. Presidents of the United States are forbidden any title of nobility and are subservient to the monarch. The U.S. President is Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces based at Camp David, which is known to insiders as Camp King David. Prime Ministers in Commonwealth nations like Canada and Australia are also subservient representatives of the British King or Queen. They are her spokesmen. The Governor-Generals of the Queen's Commonwealth nations represent and exercise the Queen's power on her behalf. What the general public doesn't realize is that their leaders are only representatives of the monarch and do not possess the power. They exercise the power. They do not reign, they rule. The monarch, on the other hand, reigns but does not rule, possesses the power but does not exercise it. By delegating her powers instead of exercising her powers, the Queen is left safely outside and above the conflicts and divisions of the political process. She is protected from becoming a target of political hostilities. Meanwhile, the general public is kept in the dark about the true powers that the Queen actually possesses, powers that she delegates but has not yet chosen to exercise. So what exactly are these powers that the Queen possesses but has not chosen to exercise? Her powers include the power to choose the Prime Minister and to dismiss the Prime Minister through her Governor-General, the power to dismiss ministers and the government, the power to dissolve Parliament and call new elections, the power to refuse legislation passed by Parliament, the power to command the armed forces and raise a personal militia. She has the power to read confidential government documents and intelligence reports, the power to declare a state of emergency and issue proclamations. She has the power to call elections and enact laws in Her Majesty's name. Few people realize that not a single law is passed without the Queen's consent. She has the power to exercise Crown prerogatives, which means the Queen can declare war through her Prime Minister without even the agreement of Parliament. She has the power to grant and bestow titles and honors like Sir, the power to pardon convicted criminals. So why has the Queen been allowed to legally possess all of these supreme powers? For the sake of tradition? What exactly is the meaning of the term the Crown? The Crown is defined as executive powers exercised in the name of the monarch. The actual crown itself, worn by the monarch, is a symbol of the Queen's executive powers. The Parliamentary Oaths Act of 1866 requires all leaders of 54 Commonwealth nations to swear an oath of loyalty to the Queen, not to the people who elected them. I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors according to law, so help me God. Those who do not swear allegiance to the Queen are deemed unfit for office, including the Prime Minister, police, military, judges, legislators, lawyers, and public servants. New citizens to the Queen's Commonwealth nations must swear allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. Public land in the Queen's colonies like Canada is called Crown land and includes Aboriginal land. Government corporations are called Crown corporations. The Central Bank of Canada and the Canadian Mint are Crown corporations independent of most government controls.
Neither Canada nor Australia, two huge and independent countries in their own right, has dispensed with her services as their head of state.
President Bush is the president of a privately owned company, privately owned, out of England. And you need to understand words and terms.
Hi, my name is Tammy Pepperman. I'm here today to talk about the current situation that I'm going through in my life involving low-intensity conflict issues that everybody is fully aware of by now. What happened was recently, as of a month and a half ago, we started indicting the IRS. What we had found was the IRS acting as also fiduciary in trust is 1/5 in total Northern Holdings and Trust. And we found this out by accident. The IRS was garnishing a Caterpillar retirement account of one of my clients. And when I went to look at the portfolio of Northern Holdings and Trust, here it is. They're the Internal Revenue Service. The Internal Revenue Service is a service, and it's in 5 parts. Southern Holdings and Trust is another portion of the Internal Revenue Service. Bridges Trust is the Inland Revenue Service in the UK, throughout Canada and other countries. And what we had done was we filed a motion for equitable estoppel against the IRS, against them, and dissented to the IRS being an agent by estoppel or agency by estoppel. An agency by estoppel is one that is created by the mechanism of law. So basically the IRS is a fiction of law. They do no thing anymore as to taxation. Taxation under the Inland Revenue Service used to be a stamp tax. You've noticed that there is no such thing any longer. And what they had done in this particular instance, and what they're doing, they were also garnishing a Social Security account. Social Security cannot be used in any legal process according to the Social Security Act. When I found that they were garnishing themselves, okay, they're the fiduciary and trust. They are garnishing the account as a different agency, which they are not. They are only a different agency by appearance, being an agency by estoppel. When we filed the motion for equitable estoppel, we also put an injunction down. And within 24 hours, the IRS lifted or appeared to lift the lien against my client and against the Caterpillar retirement and Social Security account. They did not actually lift that. This was not filed with the Register of Deeds. They did not want this to go to a court process or through a court of law or equity, according to what they wanted. We went ahead and filed. We had to open up another court case, and we filed the motion for equitable estoppel along with the Register of Deeds to pull the deed. Everybody has to pull the deeds, okay? We've done this against code enforcement in South Carolina as well. This case was in Peoria County, Illinois. In South Carolina, we had the code enforcement coming up against our client. We dissented to the agency by estoppel. They have no authority unless you consent to their authority. You have to view them as an authority and accept their authority, and then they can do whatever they want to you. If you dissent, and this is according to their own law under Bouvier maxims of law, you consent unless you dissent. That means you have to expressly dissent. And this goes along with the Cestui Que Vie Act as well. The Cestui Que Vie Act says that you can't not just simply write into the Secretary of State or whatever everybody else is doing and pull your birth bond or whatever else. You have to have an action, and this has to be a bona fide court action. You compel the judge to be there by admitting evidence onto court record, or you can do a motion to compel judicial boundaries. But you have to maintain an actual court of record of law, not legal process, not statute, not code, and you have to dissent to their authority. Once you dissent, you are no longer consenting. Your intentions are known, and they cannot maintain you any longer as a prisoner of war, which is what's going on. In 1929, our government went into bankruptcy. At that time, Geneva Convention of 1929 said, okay, corporations will be your government. They will offer you the benefits of living under their authority, but you have to accept their authority. That's no longer the case. If you dissent, you are your own government. It is not self-representation or representation. You are the authority. You must dissent, and you must dissent now. This is the ultimate patriotism. You need to be patriotic to yourself, not to the golden calf. I need to sign out at this time, but if you have any questions, please email me, tamikay23@hotmail.com. Thank you.
they took out in the good times. Now what the banks are doing is starting to reel the fishing line in, because as they go bankrupt, companies and individuals, the banks get the real wealth, the property, the land, the resources that they had signed to them for lending merely figures on a screen. Now this economic cycle of fishing line out, fishing line back, lots of units in circulation, pull them in, has been going on for centuries. And what it's done, it's stolen and accumulated the real wealth of the world in the hands of the few.
Nor are they seeing a redistribution of fraudulently obtained assets. This is especially clear in the case of the Lehman Shockwave documentary. Evidence proves the bloodline families created $23 trillion through fraud and used that money to buy up assets worldwide that had been turned into bargains by the financial collapse they had engineered.
Prove that tonight. So Congress is just as tied into the military-industrial complex as Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and the others are. Who is the main representative in our government of the people? Congress, right? If they own Congress, we don't have a vote or a voice anymore, and that's the idea.
Good afternoon. Robert Menard here, your Woodshed correspondent with Woodshed News. This just in. People across Canada are awakening to the realization that they own stock in a corporation called Canada, and that they have a right to hold this stock, collect dividends, and vote on any partnerships, mergers, and unions. This knowledge is spreading like giggles at an orgy across the country.
So, the widows of the RC members asked the Air Force, demanded, we want to know how our husbands died. What happened? I mean, we lost our husbands, their kids, one of which is in my book. We lost our dads. What happened? Well, the Air Force said, well, we can't tell you what happened because the details are classified. We're going to see more of this MO later. Believe me, it's classified. And the widows filed suit. Said, oh, no, it's not. We want to know what made that thing crash and what killed our husbands. So what did the government do? It invented this. This is based on the doctrine of the monarch of King of England. That's where the state secrets privilege came from. I thought we were supposed to be free from the king, weren't we? Wasn't that the general idea? That's where they got the state secrets privilege was, and they shut the entire case down, sealed it, and told the widows if they talked about it, they'd go to prison. However, the crash report was found on the internet, unclassified, and what it revealed was serious gross negligence on part of the pilots that drove that thing right into the ground. And I'll tell you, all right, it manipulates Congress with secrecy. I'm going to show you examples of that in a moment. Manipulates the judiciary through the state secrets privilege, which shuts down legal cases. The Foreign Surveillance Court, the FISA court, is a secret Supreme Court that approves warranted wiretaps on Americans outside the Constitution.
Oh, by the way, have you heard of the Sun Valley Conference? That's covered in here too. It's basically like the Bilderberg meeting for media, where every July all the major media moguls and tech titans, now that the tech companies are essentially media companies, all meet in Sun Valley, Idaho for a weekend conference just to discuss coordinating terms of service, acquisition deals, and setting the media agenda for the coming year. Oh, and top CIA officials are always in attendance and often keynote speakers. Why is the CIA meeting with all the heads of all the major media and tech companies every summer? You'll see.
Ja, ja. En wat een van de dingen waar voor mij een luik open ging, dat ik toen eerst niet wist, maar nu wel, dat is bijvoorbeeld geheime diensten. Je denkt dan van geheime diensten zijn in het belang van een land en van een volk, enzovoorts, enzovoort.
Ja, ja.
Maar dan blijken dat eigenlijk wat ze nu noemen criminele organisaties te zijn. Althans, het systeem is zwaar crimineel.
Ja.
Het gaat over het financieren van oorlogen, het creëren van oorlogen, het creëren van eigenlijk heel veel ellende in deze wereld. Dus ook heel veel strijd.
Ja.
En dan denk ik van jeetje, de mensen moesten eens weten hoe de wereld werkelijk in elkaar zit.
Roosevelt was financed by specialists and other members of the stock exchange for his election against Hoover. They turned from Hoover when Hoover ordered the Senate investigation of 1932. To punish him, they put Roosevelt into office, and he was put into office by their financing.
There's going to be a bunch of defaults, isn't there? I mean, isn't it going to be painful to take it back?
At the wrong level of the play. You are looking at paper currency. There was an agreement starting in the early 1900s to take all of the wealth of the world, the treasures, the gold, the diamonds, priceless treasures. These are now in a big vault in different places, buried. And this all can come out.
Common law right to travel. A lot of the things that they get us with, they've got us believing that in order for us to exercise some of our most fundamental human rights, we have to engage in contract with them. We want a license, we have to go submit an application for a license. What's going on? Fact is, you have the common law right to travel. You can get out on that highway in a privately owned automobile, travel from point A to point B. As long as you're not engaging in commerce on the highway, there is not one thing unlawful about it. I have audio tape somewhere I gotta find of a head lawyer in ICBC. I asked him flat out. I said, is there anyone in your organization with a bar card who's willing to swear under oath and on their full commercial liability that the common law right to travel no longer exists in British Columbia? His response was, no, it's there. And you give it up every time you go and you register your motor vehicle. You are not obliged to register your motor vehicle. If you do, you're signing over partial ownership of it to the state. They use a lot of trickiness with it. If you look at the Motor Vehicle Act, they define a motor vehicle. They'll say motor vehicle, in brackets, means a vehicle not run on rails, designed to be self-propelled, yada, yada, yada. The brackets, what I found out, when it's in quotation marks, that means these words, these printed words. Anytime you see these printed words in this act, you know it is referring to something that has these attributes. Where does it say all things with those attributes are being referred to? It doesn't. If I define an apple as a round red fruit, does that mean all round red fruits are apples? No, you got cherries, pomegranates, certain varieties of the more exotic Asian pears. All of these are red round and fruits, and they're not apples. When they define a motor vehicle, they don't give you the full and complete definition. There are other attributes they've left out. And you will find those attributes further in the Act. If you get to Section 3.1 of the Motor Vehicle Act, it says the owner of the motor vehicle must apply for and receive registration and insurance in the form required by ICBC. That's the missing attribute. The moment you do that, yes, now your property is a motor vehicle, and there's no one in ICBC going to claim that you have an obligation to register your personal property. They've been dealing with us for so long with people who are essentially ignorant that we don't even distinguish between statute and law, so they assume that you are going to be there. They'll say, oh, you broke this statute, you broke a law, I want to give you a ticket. And then they'll say, I need to see your ID, and if you don't show me ID, I'm going to arrest you for obstruction of justice. I've had cops do this to me, SkyTrain cops. The fact is, though, until they see ID, they have absolutely no evidence of the existence of a person who is liable under the statute. So they're putting the cart before the horse. They're saying, I see a human being. The Act says person must produce a proof of fare. You're a person. I'm giving you a ticket. Now you have to show me your ID so I can give you a ticket, because they've been told if you don't see ID, you can't give a ticket. They know this, but they're putting the cart before the horse. Ask them flat out, is this a transaction of a security interest? If he says, I don't know, then you say, well, clearly it can't be. You cannot engage in a transaction of a security interest in ignorance. So you say, okay, fine, so this isn't a transaction of a security interest. If it is, you need knowledge thereof. Since it's not a transaction of a security interest, you will not be generating any obligation upon me to pay or perform, so why am I talking to you? Have a good day. If they say, yes, it is a transaction of a security interest, you need my consent for that, and I do not consent to your transaction of a security interest. If they ask you for identification, do what my friend Digger did. He said, why do I have to show you ID when I'm not even obliged to have it, but you are? They need to show you 3 things upon demand, if you demand it. their identification card. It'll be signed by the Solicitor General. Their badge is usually right there. They will have a business card. If they don't have a business card with their name and badge number that matches their ID card, you do not know you're dealing with a proper cop. And I've caught cops wearing fake numbers and giving out fake cards.
That doesn't jive.
It does. You need all three. And when you see all three of those, then you know you're dealing with an officer who is in uniform. If he doesn't show you that, he's out of uniform, I don't have evidence that you're actually a real cop, and I'm not listening to you. And if you order me to do anything, it's under protest and duress. If he asks, the badge, ID, and business card. Thank you. Ask him, are you giving me an order? And hope he says yes. Really, that makes you liable for a bill. They hate this. Will be your set-off. Since Canada has no money, we have no money in circulation. It's all promissory notes. It's all fiat currency. It's not money. The government cannot put you in a situation where A, they've taken away the money, and then B, they put you in debt. The only way to get out of debt is to pay off with money. If you can't pay that off, you're a debtor, you're in permanent servitude essentially, an indentured servitude. You're just a step above a slave, and that's unlawful. They gave you remedy. The remedy is in the form of the fact that because there is no money in circulation, you can point to the number on the back of your birth certificate at any time and say, here, pay this off.
On this example here, I'm just trying to understand it. It makes sense to me that if because of HJR 192, they're responsible for the debt, then we should actually be sending these to, the government or the IRS for the resolution of this. So on the stamp, you have like exemption number, and then you have deposit to the U.S. Treasury and charge the same to, John A. Doe. So basically that deposit to the U.S. Treasury, that would be written on every one of them, whether it be this IRS example that I have here, or a car loan, or a credit card bill, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, the value. How can you do that? Look, who's got their birth certificates on them right now? Pull it out and look at the back of your birth certificate. On the back of that birth certificate, you will find a number. It's a bond tracking number. The government generated and floated a bond when you were registered as a child. This bond generates revenue every year. The Federal Minister of Finance is acting as your fiduciary agent in trust over your account. When's the last time you told him what to do with your money? Never. So his obligation then is under the Financial Administration Act. His obligation is to transfer it to a registered representative. That's your provincial representatives. They do this every year in the form of the federal transfer payments. Part of what they're transferring, part of what your federal representatives are transferring to your provincial representatives is money generated from your bond, and they have no right to touch that money whatsoever if they're not acting as your representative. A bill. Please send me a bill that's going to have a signature on it. When you're done sending me that, I want to see the contract, the lawful two-party contract supporting that bill. If you can't show me that, stop asking me for money. If once you do that, you get it to a point, what you will end up getting, they call a remittance, the final notice, your final notice, you must pay this. If you look on that envelope when you open it up, in the lower corner, they call it a remittance. They want you to take this remittance and send it in with the check, say for $40. Here's the thing, if this was a bill, why do they want it back? When's the last time you ever paid a bill and then had the person who presented you with the bill demand that bill back? You pay the bill so you can keep it and say, I don't owe you anything anymore. But they want it back. What's a remittance? I looked it up. A form of money. It's money. It's sent by one merchant to another, either in bill of exchange, check, specie, or otherwise. They have sent you a piece of paper worth $40. But they messed up because the word that they put on it is amount, not value. What you are going to do is you are going to take that little remittance. Imagine for a moment, this is what they're doing, I think. Imagine you want someone to come over and cut your grass. So you hire a company to come cut your grass, and then he's halfway through cutting your grass. You realize you're a stockholder in that company. And you realize that as a stockholder, you have the right just to sign his check. He can give you the bill, you'll sign it, give it back to him. He can take that to the accountant in the company and get paid the $40 for cutting your grass. But it's going to have a negative effect on your stock. It's coming out of your stock. So what if you decide, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that route. I'm not going to devalue my stock. I'm just going to give you a check for cutting my grass. But what you've done now is you've given him two pieces of paper. Each one is worth $40. This $40 check does not cancel out the $40 remittance. The $40 check is what they're charging you to do the administration on your remittance. They sign it on your behalf. They send that off. They're getting paid twice. All you have to do is take that remittance, put value across it, assign value to it, accept it for value, send it off to them. They can now it's money. Now you've valued it. You've treated it like a remittance as a species of money, and you're done. And we've been doing this, and we've even got them on tape acknowledging that you can do it. We've got a peace officer acknowledging that we always have this option when dealing with these things. If you look on those tickets, they'll tell you payment instructions, dispute instructions. So you can pay or you can dispute. If you choose the dispute route and you go in there, they'll give you a piece of paper and it says right on it, date dispute was created. Dispute created by. You created dispute. You never offered discussion. You never offered anything. You jumped right into the dispute and now you're in dishonor. Whether or not you win in court doesn't really matter. You're in court in dishonor. All you had to do was accept what they give you, say, I value that, there you go, take it back. Now how can you do this? How can you just take a remittance and assign value to it?
Antarctica. He's got also a documentary film producer. He is a precious metal stealer. He's first dealt with the Antarctica, actually Nazis in Antarctica. Probably people thought he was crazy back in 2005, and now it's out in the mainstream press. Nazis in Antarctica in 2005. His latest book has come out just in December of 2016 called Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II. Now, this is an artist rendition. This isn't a real picture of a flying saucer, but you get the point. This is Empire Beneath the Ice. This is the latest of 11 books by, and let's bring him on, Steve Quayle of stevequayle.com. Steve Quayle, I know it was a very long introduction, but thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Well, Greg, this is a delight for me to come on and to share with your viewers just why Antarctica is in the news and in the headlines to the degree it is. It was left kind of as just that ice base south of South America. But what most people don't understand, and this is critical, is that in 1947, the United States sent a war flotilla to the Antarctic under Admiral Byrd, and it was called Operation Highjump, and it was to seek out and to destroy the hidden Nazi bases that intelligence agencies had provided them the documentation for. It wasn't a small thing, 13 ships, 4,700 men, and the state-of-the-art, if you will, advances in U.S. weaponry. The bad news is we got our rear ends kicked. And in 1947, it was actually February, the thing started in August of 46, ended in 1947, Admiral Byrd came back and reported to Congress what had happened. The Russians, incidentally, had made a video, because they were spying, of our aircraft encountering flying saucers. Now, in order to put this into perspective, two of the heads of NASA, which is our National Aeronautic and Space Administration, were former Nazis, very prominent scientists.
Operation, and just how did that happen? And let's just go ahead and tell people a program called Operation Paperclip, where we were in a rush to beat the Russians, to go into Germany and take their scientists and bring them over to America to help with our warfare, Defense Department, and advance our technology. Correct?
Absolutely. And when you deal with Hermann Oberth and you deal with Dr. Werner von Braun, and Hermann Oberth's famous statement is, think not that we Germans were brighter than any other scientists. We had help from other worlds. And that's interesting because, over the years...
That was actually, and just so you know, I just want to kind of bring this in here, because I don't want people... we talked about this in the very pre-interview, that I don't want people to think you're crazy, Steve Quayle. You're not crazy. I would never put you on if I thought you were. And many people are fans of yours and do not think you're crazy. Some people may. But that quote that you gave was a quote that I heard for my own ears on the History Channel. I heard that quote that you just gave. So go ahead. I interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, Operation Paperclip, but there were 7 other operations under the same thing. We brought in, for instance, even the Japanese weapons designer, Dr. Ishii, ISHI. So that was the plan of Western intelligence to bring it in. So let's get back to the Antarctic. When Admiral Byrd came back, he had the first Secretary of Defense on his side to tell the American people what was really going on in the Antarctic, and that was Forrestal. Forrestal, again, was the first Secretary of Defense, and when he was wanting to tell the American people what they had found through Operation Highjump and the advanced technology, he was thrown out a 3rd-story window at Bethesda Naval Hospital. So when you're dealing with the Antarctica and you're dealing with the history of the Antarctica, it is steeped in absolute, not only mythology and, let's just say this, mythological references, but in the 1500s, even the Piri-Reis map showed Antarctica without ice. Now that basically comes into total conflict with the modern geologic time frame of glaciation.
So, Steve, even during World War II, there were reports of giants and cannibalism coming out of the Solomon Islands. What was that all about?
After World War II, people couldn't reconcile the fact that a lot of servicemen, U.S. servicemen, had been eaten, cannibalized, as well as Japanese. And the fascinating investigation I've come up with was the fact that the Solomon Islands are riddled with stories of cannibalistic giants and even living giants to this day. I was contacted by a man named Marius who was literally going to meet me in California with, let's just say this, irrefutable evidence. But he said to me on the phone, he said, Steve, I'm being followed and I'm not sure I'll even make it there alive. What has to be asked, the question that needs to be asked and has to be asked, is that why do people who have the evidence, why are they intimidated? Why are they threatened? Why are they disappeared? What is this cover-up? And I'll tell you the bottom line, they do not want people to understand.
Primary term is 3 years for river tracts, 5 years for submerged and upland tracts. Key areas include Galveston Bay, Trinity Bay, the offshore area from Galveston, Sabine Lake and Nueces River, and a number of tracts, river tracts. In fact, we have 67 river tracts up for bid on this sale, and the largest amount of those being in the Eagle Ford area in South Texas. Some 45 tracts are down into that area, 45 plus or minus tracts. Looking at the offshore nominated tracts, you see a few nominated tracts here in Sabine Lake, and these are put up at $500 an acre for the most part. A lot of activity in Galveston and Trinity Bays in terms of nominated tracts. These are $300, been put up at $300 per acre. There's some scattered tracts offshore. Here's some tracts in offshore here. 150, 200 to about $200 per acre in some of this stuff offshore. As we drop down a little further, drop down. Okay. Matagorda Bay, we've got some activity in Matagorda Bay, $200 per acre. Swinging down into Redfish Bay and Corpus Christi Bay, some tracts down in this area at $250 per acre. Some offshore stuff here off of Nueces and Clayburgh County and San Patricio County at $300 per acre. So there's a good scattering of tracts. This just picks up that tail end there. So there's a good scattering of tracts both in the bays and in the offshore. There are about 300 bay tracts up and about 100, a little over 100 Gulf tracts up for this sale. Staff recommends approval of the terms and conditions.
Things as post offices. Now, interestingly, in the city of Van Nuys, the Van Nuys courthouse, Marvin Breyer found out that the courthouse, the entire courthouse, was bought for $5 by a judge.
Today is May 1st, 1992. The subject of this video message is the UNCED Earth Summit, the meeting which is to begin on June 1st, 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. The acronym UNCED stands for the United Nations Committee for Environment and Development. It is pronounced Unsaid, and perhaps indicating the secret agenda of this meeting. This is the logo of the Earth Summit. This is not a dove in their Earth Summit logo. It is a hand, and the hand is holding the world with the slogan, "In our hands," alongside of it. In whose hands? Who is the we in this motto? The hands of the world order. These elitists convened this unsaid meeting in the first place, and for a bad purpose. This video will show strong evidence that the persons running the Unsaid Earth Summit are actually setting a net to place the power over the earth and its peoples into their hands. Brave, bold deeds by the citizenry are needed quickly. Once a government signs their treaties, their citizens are, de jure, in the hands of the world order. There's that motto again, in our hands. Whose hands? The same world order families that planned World War I and World War II, that tricked the third world countries to borrow funds and rack up enormous debts. The same world order that stole much of the money borrowed by Africans and other nations and hid it in Geneva banks. They are the persons who financed Hitler, manufactured the Holocaust, and managed to blame the terrible deeds on the German people. They can be credited with manipulating famines in Ethiopia and elsewhere, and purposely creating war and debt to bring societies into their control. The world order crowd are not a nice group of people. My name is George Hunt. I'm speaking to you from a video studio in Boulder, Colorado. I have attended some of the meetings and caucuses leading to the Unsaid Earth Summit. I am a business consultant and a college teacher in small business management. I own an environment company too, and am very familiar with the environment hypocrisy that the world order crowd has taken over the environment movement. I am aware of their plans. Please pardon me as I read my script. I'm not a professional actor, and my memory will not serve me with the things that I want to say. The world environment movement will soon be in the hands of the world order if you and others do not respond with action after you view this videotape. Action may constitute showing this to 5 others. It may constitute showing it to a judge down the street or a city councilman who you know in your town. Pray for guidance, hoping that something good might come of your actions. Somebody is going to set the spark off. I really feel that it is not too late. When I served as an official host at a key environment meeting in Denver, Colorado in 1987, I was surprised to see David Rockefeller, Edmund de Rothschild, Secretary of State Baker, then Secretary of the Treasury, Maurice Strong, Waste Company Chairman and EPA Administrator William Ruckelshaus, UN Secretary General in Geneva McNeil, and various World Bank and IMF officials there. What were the rich elite and bankers doing at an Environment Congress? Listen carefully. I will now attempt to show you how their enactments will work against you. Trust and foundation income is the cornerstone of the world order. They command politicians to do their bidding, and presidents, judges, and legislators lick their boots. Their swollen egos and bellies are never satisfied, and their lust for more is insatiable. Now world power and authority is in their grasp. Are we going to give it to them without a confrontation? Or, like they did to the Germans, will they blame the environment holocaust on you and get away with it? What is the World Summit meeting, and who is behind it? The Unsaid World Summit, that's UNCED World Summit, is a key event in a series of environment meetings which have occurred since 1972. Maurice Strong, a UN official and an employee of the Rockefeller and Rothschild Trusts and Projects, convened the first Congress in Stockholm, Sweden in 1972.
Those core wilderness areas are to be interconnected by wilderness corridors off limits to human beings. Those wilderness areas are to be surrounded by buffer zones that may have limited resource use under the supervision and permitting of the federal government.
According to a report in WorldNet Daily, some of the richest men and women in the world met secretly in New York recently. When the world's wealthiest individuals hold secret meetings, it's time to pay attention. In 1910, the 6 wealthiest men in the world met at Jekyll Island, Georgia. That meeting resulted in the creation, 3 years later, of the largest criminal enterprise ever devised, the Federal Reserve, so-called. Judging from the list of participants, the recent meeting in New York may result in something even more monumental. The London Times identified them as Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, Ted Turner, Oprah Winfrey, Warren Buffett, George Soros, and New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Based on the Forbes magazine list of billionaires, the room had a net worth of about $120 billion. With all the bailout figures we've heard recently, it doesn't sound like that much. Believe me, it is. $120 billion is about equal to the annual budget for all of New York State, from New York City to Buffalo, and everything in between. The meeting, which took place in early May, was at the home of Sir Paul Nurse, a British Nobel Prize-winning biochemist and president of Rockefeller University. Microsoft's founder, Bill Gates, called the meeting. The London Times reported the informal afternoon session was so discreet that some of the billionaire's aides were told they were at security briefings. Discreet is the British way of saying secret. I do not believe that it is coincidental that this meeting came only a couple of weeks after another super secret and more powerful group met in the secrecy in Greece, the Bilderberg Group. They have advocated a one-world government for at least a century. They also see themselves as the elite saviors of mankind. According to the Times, the billionaires were each given 15 minutes to present their favorite cause. Over dinner, they discussed how they might settle on an umbrella cause that could harness their interest. Taking their cue from Gates, the report said they agreed that population control was the #1 issue. Experts say the global population will top 7 billion in 2012. According to reports at the meeting, Bill Gates outlined a plan to cap the global population at 8.3 billion. It all sounds so civilized, doesn't it? Here's the less politically correct but more accurate version. A group of unelected liberals with more money than many governments have just decided how many people will be permitted to live. This group of self-appointed governors will now have to draw up criteria to be used to decide who will not be permitted to live and how they will die. It can and will be dressed up in polite and civil terms, but in the end, it means certain people will have to die. In the final analysis, there's only one way to cap a population: by deciding who's permitted to live and who, for the good of all, must die.
Government people say we must be part of this new technology. This new technology is crazy science. It's unsafe science, and it's not proven science. And if we've had in North America 11, 12 years of GMOs, how come we don't have lots of food now to feed the hungry world? The corporations want total control of the seed supply, which will then give them total control of the food supply.
air, and our water. Last year, ExxonMobil made $19 billion in profit. Guess what? They paid zero in taxes. They got a $156 million refund from the IRS. I guess that's not good enough. We've got to give the oil companies even more tax breaks.
Between 1947 and 1949, the government passed the National Security Act and the CIA Act. These laws allowed the intelligence community to withdraw money from any agency without disclosure. Essentially, money could be stolen from any program, and no elected official would ever know about it.
In the previous video, I brought up the deep underground military bases that can be found all over the earth. These play a very important part in their soon-to-come grand deception.
Right now, there are 131 active deep underground military bases in the United States. There's 1,477 of them worldwide. Each one has an average cost of $17 to $19 billion. Each one is built in the site, it used to be, it'd take a year to 2 years to build each one, and now they're capable of building a couple of them a year with sophisticated methods. My colleague, Al Bielik, has actually been on some of the high-speed railways, the magneto-leviton trains that connect all the deep underground military bases within the United States. He's been on a Mach 2 train and floats off a single rail at a 3/4 of an inch off the rail, and is what you call high tech. We have nothing like this on the surface. Groom Lake is where the infamous Area 51, S4, S2, a CIA base. It was originally a bombing range, a nuclear test site. It was later become the most secret base in the United States. It employs over 18,000 workers who work in shifts of 12 hours at a whack. Most of them work in the cover of darkness, like us. We built out 9 underground military bases there, each with an average capacity capable was basically a city underground, roughly 4¼ cubic miles hollowed out underground. They have boring machines, for instance. They don't bore, they literally vitrify and melt the rock, deflagrate the rock. It's a very sophisticated laser melting and deflagrating system. It reduces the rock to a powder and then melts the remaining rock as a coating on the inside of the base, so you don't have to use gunite, cements, and other kinds of things like that. That's all old hat now. Technology is just basically, the new technology we get is the old hat of the military. Anyway, after we drilled all 4 holes, it took about 2 days to drill all 4 of them. And when you build an underground base, you drill 4 basic holes, and then you build called stopes or cross-member holes across, and then you use blasting equipment and special blasting equipment by the analyzation of the rock formation. And you literally blast out or tunnel out or deflagrate or melt rock out to build the large rooms that are required for this underground base. I was involved in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. It's a biological laboratory. On the southwest part of the Archuleta Mesa, we built an underground facility, a better part of 3 cubic miles hollowed out underground. Then to the southwest of that, we were in the process of the early stages of building. We drilled 4 large tunnel-like holes. Some of them ran 2.5 miles under the surface. At that time, number of the original wells or drilling machines that were used were at the rate of 2 miles a day. Area 51 is only one base, one of the 131 bases. Of these 131 bases, I call Area 51 a mega base. It's got more than one base in it. It's Tonopah Test Range, Area 51, S2, S4, Groom Lake, and a host of others. Now, these mega bases are gobbling up our gross national product. Right now we're spending 28% of the gross national product on building underground bases solely. That doesn't count for the defense budget. That doesn't count for the spare parts budget. It doesn't count for any of that at all. And the black budget is dead wrong. It sidesteps the United States Congress and its Constitution of its people and says you're a bunch of morons you don't need to know. Well, a need-to-know basis is an executive order written during the Eisenhower era right after the created 1954 treaty and is treasonous and illegal in this country and should be overturned and abolished. All this alien thing is fine, except for one thing. Alien takeover is a serious threat. Kept totally out of the public view, off the surface, I'm sure the underground bases, without question, are being used as a place to house alien takeover. Alien takeover means the implementation of a one-world government.
Thanks to the people like Julian Assange, Phil Schneider, and many more who are willing to risk their lives to do what's right, we have been able to get the whole picture in their grand scheme of unimaginable crimes against humanity. Today, there are approximately 130 deep underground military bases in the United States alone, with depths of over a mile to almost 3 miles. They have nuclear-powered laser drilling machines that can drill a tunnel 7 miles long in one day. The Dulles military base in New Mexico is probably the deepest. It goes down 7 levels. They have been building these day and night, unceasingly, since the early 1940s. These bases are basically large cities underground, connected by high-speed magneto-leviton trains that have speeds up to Mach 2. Trillions upon trillions of dollars have gone into this bottomless pit called the black budget. Obama doubled the debt himself in just 8 years.
Not just the central bankers, but the Vatican. For example, people don't know that their IRS revenue is going to the Vatican.
If you learn to distinguish between actual law, and there is only 3 ways to break the law: harm another human being, damage someone else's property, use fraud or mischief in your contracts, you have broken the law. That's the only way to break the law. If you distinguish between statutes and law, you're on your way. You need to distinguish between these. If you can distinguish between the City of Edmonton, which is actually properly called the Corporation of the City of Edmonton, and Edmonton City, you can distinguish between the legal entity, which is where all the bylaws are, because if you look up definition of bylaw, you know what it says? Rule of a corporation. So why are these corporations imposing these rules upon you if you let them know, I'm not even, oh yeah, I'm walking down the street in Vancouver City, but that doesn't mean I'm a person in the Corporation of the City of Vancouver.
Since the Lehman crisis, the central banks have been carrying out so-called quantitative monetary easing. However, the vast sums being created as a result of this policy are being funneled only to financial companies controlled by Khazarian mafia honchos. They have not done things like put money directly into ordinary people's personal bank accounts. That is why the quantitative easing has had the effect of increasing wealth disparity. Forensic analysis shows that most of the money flowed through about 700 individuals, so that means it is not the 1% but rather the 0.0000001% who has benefited from the money printing. The reason for this is because the bloodline families still control the privately owned central banks for their own personal benefit, not for the benefit of the planet and its living beings.